O my people, I will open your graves and have you rise from them. I will put my spirit in you that you may live. If the spirit of the one who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, then the one who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also. What does it mean to live? To be called from the grave, that a spirit might be put in you, that life might dwell within you. To live is to be ecstasis. Ecstasis. It's not to implode or to explode. And I use those images because it helps us understand what it means to be ecstasis. A thing that implodes upon itself, crushes itself underneath its own weight. And of all the natural things that I can think about imploding is the black star. Scientists, astrologers try to figure out, astronomers try to figure out what a black star is. And the theory that some have arrived at is that it's a star that has gained so much material weight, so much mass, that it crushes itself underneath its own gravity. So that gravity actually is stronger than the molecular bonds of all of its material. And because it's stronger, it takes something that's huge, tens of thousands of times larger than our sun, and crushes it down into what they consider an infinitesimal point, something as tiny as my fist or as my finger. And the gravity of such a massive thing in such a small space doesn't even allow light to leave. Light itself is not able to overcome the gravitational pull. And so what remains is a black hole. A thing that is so full of itself that it implodes on itself and no light can leave. As opposed to a supernova is the opposite of implosion, it's explosion. A supernova is whenever a star gains a type of mass that can no longer maintain its own interior balance and it becomes unstable. And in its instability, it explodes. And that casts light, fire, destruction all around it. For billions and trillions of miles, a supernova star can be seen through our telescope, even though it was millions and millions of years ago that it exploded. But like a black star, a supernova that explodes also loses its light. It loses its very self. And there may be cosmic dust, but there is no thing in itself. But our sun, the stars that we see with our eyes in the sky, they have a balance proper to maintain its integrity and to allow light to leave. And the human person is called to live. Or as Jesus says inside Scripture, to let our light shine so that others might see it. A star, properly balanced, is ecstasis. It's able to stand outside itself. Ex means out, stasis means to stand. For us in our common English, especially whenever it comes to the idea of life, ecstasis is ecstatic. To be ecstatic is to stand outside oneself. To have something move you from within that allows you to move outside towards other people. And the common idea of ecstasis or ecstatic, it's to be joyful or to be expressive. And whenever Lazarus was dead, Jesus called into a tomb and called him out of the tomb, to stand out of the tomb, ecstasis. To live is to be called out of oneself, to be light for others so that others can participate in joy and gift of self. A supernova star is a person who's so full of themselves in one way or another. I'm sorry, not a super, but a black star is a person who's so full of themselves that no light can leave them. Either they're so filled with arrogance that everything gets pulled to themselves and crushed, or they're so filled with self-loathing that they're unable to even consider themselves as valuable to anyone else. They can live in complete isolation or bitterness, or life has so overtaken them that they live in a type of despair that allows no light to leave from them. In these ways, we can implode on ourselves, and life is diminished, if not completely destroyed. Or other persons who are so unstable inside their own self that they have to have the validation of every other person, and that they can't define themselves, so they put themselves into frenetic activity, doing everything they can. They're stretched too thin, they do too much, they say too much, they talk too much. They're so pulled by media, so pulled by the desire for wealth, so pulled by all sorts of other things that they don't even have a sense of self anymore. A person who's living explosively, that destroys their own particular identity, is a person who can't think for themselves what their identity should be. So they live with the latest trend or the latest movement. They compare themselves to every other person to see how they should live, but they have no idea how Christ has called them to live inside themselves by the power of the created gift that they are as an individual person. The secret of life with Jesus Christ is to remember that you were created to live. A phrase that has come to me over the past few months that I've been meditating on. God gave you life for you to live, not for someone else to live it for you. And that's burdensome. In a certain sense, it's almost terrible. Some people, under the weight of the burden of life, implode on themselves. Other people, under the weight of burden of life, don't know how to manage themselves. They lose themselves. And this world fits into this lacunae, into this darkness, into this instability, and tries to pacify people with the art of distraction. This world tries to assuage everybody's fears or selfish desires or inability to have a sense of self in every possible way. They bring out more products for you to sell. If you have my product, you'll know who you are. They make more clothes. If you have this latest fashion, everybody will think you're something special. More promises that if you have a better 401k or a bigger payment or if you get a bigger house, it's all going to be what you want. Or they flood you with information, babbling, talking heads that keep blathering about anything and everything because they give you the sense that if you can just hear somebody talking, then you're actually doing something worthwhile. The amount of information that floods the normal human person today is incredible. And I think one of our challenges in modern day society is that we don't know how to handle all the information that's given to us or how to define the difference between good information and bad information. We just get flooded with this horrible diet of mental trash. And then we get lost in these meanderings of media. And before we know it, we've wasted so much time. So much time. How many persons, whenever they're surfing the web or going through social media, come out of this slumber 2 or 3 hours later going, I thought I was going to bed at 10 p.m. And it's 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. How many of us have to use our televisions like pacifiers just to lull ourselves to sleep? That if we don't have that thing blinking around our room, then somehow we're not going to be able to even get rest. And the world has tried to fill this lacunae of a loss of a sense of life by all these pacifiers. We're no longer standing outside ourselves ecstatically, living well. We're actually taken away from ourselves explosively or falling in on ourselves, imploding. I remember one time my mom and I were walking through a store. It was like a Target or something like that. And I was older at the time. We were walking through a baby aisle. She didn't have a baby. We just happened to be there. I don't have a baby. We just happened to be there. And we were walking through this aisle, and she stopped. And she looked. She goes, Jarrod, she goes, notice this. And I go, notice what? Notice how many products are produced designed to keep the baby away from the parents. How much money do parents spend on materials to keep the baby out of their hand? This world has spent billions of dollars to keep you away from yourself and away from the Lord. They want you to implode or explode, because if you have to be defined by somebody else's sense, then they are able to control who you are. But Jesus Christ has come to yell into each one of our tombs, Lazarus, come out, stand on your own 2 feet. We have to recognize that we are called to live in love. Life is love. Death is separation from relationship. Specifically in the story about Lazarus, the situation of death was he was separated from his sisters, separated from his friends, separated from Jesus himself, who wept at the death of a friend. And Jesus went to restore relationship, to bring him back into Mary and Martha, back into his own life. Because remember, Lazarus had to die twice. That's a pretty unlucky situation. He died again later on. Jesus didn't restore him back to perpetual physical life. He restored him back to relationship. Life is relationship lived well. And that's ecstatic. That makes life worth living. That is whenever we savor every moment with an intensity and an intelligence, knowing that this moment is valuable because this is a moment that I can become a gift given to other people, that I can be a light shining for other people. And so God calls us to these 3 levels of love that are the definition of ecstatic living. To love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. To be who you are, created in the image and likeness of God, with an intellect and a will, with the ability to enter into relationship and to look forward to the Lord and to worship Him is the first ecstasis that God gives us. The first outside ourselves in which we stand before the Lord, with hands raised high, recognizing that in worship of Him, we have a savoring of life. And then recognizing in that worship the gratitude that we should have, that we have been created, that we have a self, a life that each one of us can live, and that my life, myself, is a gift. And that whenever I am in myself living, I am a gift not only unto myself, but for others as well. This great gift in which I pay attention to other people's needs and allow other people to be the apple of my eye, the cause of my action. Standing outside myself, I give myself away. The love of neighbor. This love of neighbor that God calls us to imitate Him even in His cross, even to the death of ourself. Presupposed on that love of self that lets you remember that you are a precious child of God in yourself. And He gave you this life to live ecstatically. The tomb of life is distracted living. Life is living for other people. When you love God and you love your neighbor, then you'll live ecstatically.